It is now my great honor to introduce our second keynote of the day, Ms. Alice Nderitu, who is the Special Advisor on Genocide at the United Nations. She hails from Kenya, a place where we have been many times, and we've had a wonderful time talking about that over the last few days. She is an internationally recognized expert on anti-hate, on human rights, on the rights of women. She is a commissioner at the National Cohesion and Integration Commission in Kenya. She's the founder of Community Voices for Peace and Pluralism, which is a network of African women who are fighting against hate and extremism in all of its forms. She is the head of the Human Rights Education and Capacity Building Program for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, a member of the Kenya National Committee on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, War Crimes, Crimes Against Humanity, and all forms of discrimination. We're pleased to have her here, and you may have all had the opportunity to see her and talk to her over the last few days. And she is an extremely talented, internationally known person, and she has also taken the time to be here with us. Since the opening moments of this conference on Sunday night, the night before, she took the time out of her schedule to come to be with us, to be with the families, and to sit with us over all 3 days. She canceled an international trip to be able to be here and to stay with us. And so that extraordinary commitment of an extraordinary woman makes me particularly privileged to introduce to you our honored keynote, Ms. Alice Nderitu, the Special Advisor on Genocide to the United Nations.
Thank you very much for extending this invitation to my office. And I'm here with my colleague, Thea Sandberg. You've invited us to this inaugural event of the Eradicate Hate Global Summit, Seeds of Hope from the Tree of Life. And I begin by honoring those who lost their lives here, their families, and those who survived. I do not know how to explain to you what it means to be sitting in this room, immersed among people discussing the things that we do every single day. How useful this has been, I do not know how to explain that. The position I hold as United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide was established by the late Secretary General Kofi Annan, following the failure of the international community to prevent the genocide against the Tutsi and the moderate Hutu in Rwanda in 1994, and the genocide in Srebrenica, Bosnia-Herzegovina in 1995. So the core of my mandate is prevention of atrocity crimes, by which we mean genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And it does mean a lot to me as someone who has dedicated most of her life to mediating armed conflict, peace building, and violence prevention to be with you here in Pittsburgh. So my previous knowledge on Pittsburgh was based on an invitation by mediators beyond borders, who are represented in this conference by PRABA, and they invited me early last year, to conduct a conflict analysis on the United States of America before the elections. So as United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, I was recently in Rwanda and Bosnia and Herzegovina, responding to growing concerns around persistent patterns of denial of the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, glorification of war criminals, hate speech, and rhetoric of division. So my visits were also aimed at contributing to trust-building efforts, including by supporting initiatives at the community level. In both countries, Rwanda and Bosnia-Herzegovina, genocidaires, jailed for what then seemed like many years, 11 years, 15 years, are now being released and remorseful back into the public. These people had challenged historical facts that formed the basis of their convictions. The fear among survivors is unimaginable. So as we've seen since the Nuremberg trials, the most common form of genocide denial is to reject the facts of its happening. However, evidence arising from the multiple trials, that is Nuremberg, the International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda, International Criminal Tribunal of Yugoslavia, is, to quote Alan Tiger, ICTY prosecutor, vast, layered, and interconnected, permitting one to understand what happened on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. Yet, denial continues. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the denial is especially evident. Every day, survivors are confronted with memorials from which the word genocide is erased, statements by politicians denying the genocide, murals celebrating convicted perpetrators, awards given in their names. In what is clearly not a coincidence, there's a clear connection between Holocaust and genocide deniers. Holocaust deniers provide the template to what sociologist Stephen Cohen, for instance, refers to as denial of interpretation. Itself, ironically, a confession that something happened. So that usually goes like, a terrible crime happened in Auschwitz and Rwanda, Srebrenica. However, the deniers say it wasn't a Holocaust or a genocide. So what has become very clear to me in my role is that unless we deal with Holocaust deniers and do not leave the task of doing so to the survivors and their families, the Holocaust denial template will continue for centuries going forward to provide a template for denial of atrocities around the world. So I lead an office with a global mandate. We look at situations worldwide, considering potential escalation to commission of atrocity crimes with the knowledge that history has proved that no part of the world is immune from the risks of these crimes. So on a daily basis, we collect and analyze information on risk of genocide, following up on sources, including field visits to verify, using the framework of atrocity crimes, a tool developed by my office to assess risks of genocide and other atrocity crimes. With the verified information, we provide early warning on actions to prevent or halt genocide, mainly by issuing public statements or submitting advisory notes to the Secretary General and briefing the Security Council on situations that could escalate to atrocity crimes. So on a daily basis, we process issues of people being persecuted because of who they are, their ethnicity, religion, culture, or even physical characteristics. Anti-Semitism, as has been said by many before me, sitting up here, is on the rise, with Jews being discriminated for no other reason than their identity. I was in Lindau, Germany, for a religious leaders conference earlier this month, when I heard the horrible news of what my office now considers a huge risk factor that we must address, the news that anti-Semitic graffiti had been found in Auschwitz. I cannot even explain what I felt. I first went to Auschwitz as a participant of the Raphael Lemkin seminar by the Auschwitz Institute for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities that I would later join as an instructor, teaching prevention of the genocide and linking early warning to early response. We've seen anti-Semitism through online hate speech, desecrated cemeteries, and the horrendous attacks such as happened here at the Tree of Life Synagogue. We've also seen a lot of anti-religious hatred on a daily basis against Muslims or Christians. Refugees and migrants have become the scapegoats of problems in many societies. Xenophobia and racism against indigenous people and people of African descent continues to be all too present. Political leaders have brought hate-fueled ideas and language into the mainstream, directed hateful rhetoric at anyone considered the other, resulting in hate-based violence. I therefore looked forward to this summit as a much-needed platform for ideas to address these dangerous trends, raising awareness about the lessons of the past to prevent our populations from the crime of genocide and other atrocities. So there's a lot more that my office is doing. We lead the implementation of the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech, launched by the Secretary General in 2019. This strategy sets out guidance for United Nations entities and other societal actors to address hate speech at the national and global level, enhance efforts to tackle the root causes and drivers of hate speech, including racism and racial discrimination, therefore enabling effective responses by the UN system to the impact of hate speech on societies. The strategy is in line with international human rights standards and within the right to freedom of opinion and expression. We have seen hate speech as a precursor to the commission of serious international crimes, from the Holocaust to the genocide in Rwanda and in Srebrenica. More recently, hate speech is strongly linked to violence, such as resulted here, and resulted in killings in several regions of the world, including, for example, the Central African Republic, Myanmar, Sri Lanka. Too many to name here. So my office has supported several UN country teams, peacekeeping and special political missions, and member states, too many again to name here, to develop and implement context-specific action plans on hate speech. As hate speech continues to spread online, my office engages tech and social media companies in Chatham House Rules roundtables, the latest of which was in June, on their role and responsibility to address online hate speech in line with international human rights standards and norms, and with a view to discuss the implementation of the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech in the online space. So some key challenges include what to do when hate speech does not meet the threshold of incitement, or when it's in languages that tech and social media companies do not have translation for. So I urge that we engage with online communities within certain realities. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, I saw firsthand the digital divide in the global south, as people without electricity were cut off from global online meetings. We must enable participation of those without access to technology, as decisions continue to be made for and on their behalf, in which they cannot participate. Hate speech thrives everywhere, even when it's not amplified by social media, and millions of people are missing in these digitally enabled conversations. Our office has also facilitated the development of a plan of action for religious leaders and actors to prevent incitement to violence that could lead to atrocity crimes, also called the FAIR's Plan of Action, after the city in Morocco where it was drafted, with the help of religious actors from different faiths and beliefs. This FAIR's Plan of Action includes options that religious actors as well as other societal actors can consider implementing to prevent and counter incitement to violence in situations at risk of atrocity crimes. In July this year, we supported the passing of a resolution passed by the General Assembly of the United Nations, recognizing the importance of interreligious and intercultural dialogue and its valuable contribution to promoting social cohesion, peace and development, and encountering hate speech. This resolution proclaimed 18th June as the International Day for Countering Hate Speech, and requested the President of the General Assembly to organize a high-level meeting on hate speech to mark the commemoration of the first International Day next year. Next week, on October 26, 2021, we shall hold, in partnership with UNESCO, a global ministerial conference chaired by the Secretary General, attended by all ministers of education worldwide, on the role of education in addressing and building resilience against hate speech. On October 28th, next week again, 2021, we have organized for a briefing by myself and representatives of tech and social media companies for the Security Council on the topic of tech and social media companies addressing and countering hate speech. We intend, that's my office, to continue working with partners to brief the Security Council on different aspects of hate as often as possible. We see this as a marathon that we have to keep running and running for a long time. So based on my experience, I do consider it a priority to translate from an intergenerational perspective the concept of genocide prevention as an international and national norm into a practical reality implemented at community levels. So much research points at atrocities happening within local communities, pointing at civilians as the primary target. So we are therefore building traction worldwide for locally led initiatives on prevention of genocide and other atrocity crimes by strengthening the capacities of community organizations through intercommunal dialogue, addressing root causes, amplifying what we peace builders know from years of analysis, that hotspots are issues, not places, developing community plans of action to counter and address hate speech, identifying the policy and advocacy processes within the genocide and the other atrocity crimes prevention fields with the potential for most impact at community level. So we are also building relationships between practitioners and academics to initiate research, share best practices on prevention of atrocity crimes, and support use of social media to prevent atrocity crimes. Continuing the tradition I have worked on for decades of ensuring that women's contribution to peace and the prevention of atrocity crimes does not continue to be undervalued and ignored, As the first woman advisor to the Secretary General on the prevention of genocide, I am working to ensure that this exclusion of women deficit does not continue to constitute a challenge to the prevention of atrocities such as genocide. And consistently, I wear this flower from Srebrenica, of the mothers of Srebrenica. If you've been to Srebrenica, you know this flower that I am wearing. It's a consistent reminder for me that every single day I have to do something for women to ensure that women get into the spaces that I'm now privileged to sit in. So we need to work with communities to contextualize this framework that we use, the framework of analysis for atrocity crimes, to local situations, including building their own early warning and response capacities, monitoring and reporting, as well as community resilience. We are supporting scholars, especially from the Global South, and as you noted that we often cite Western scholars on the Holocaust or on genocide, and we are supporting scholars from the Global South to mainstream atrocity prevention in educational institutions by creating this whole network, developing a framework for training, teaching curriculum on genocide and Holocaust studies. We are starting the development of examinable courses and academic modules incorporating genocide studies and Holocaust studies and prevention into existing teaching and strengthening the institutional capacity of teachers. So with the first team of such scholars, which really is the first team in Africa, we are meeting in December in Senegal, and by the time we leave the meeting, we will have drafted a course outline on what they can teach on genocide and Holocaust prevention. So my mandate demands of me to be a catalyst to raise awareness of causes and dynamics about genocide and mobilize action to prevent another genocide. So I would say that debunking deniers can be made more useful by translating the evidence against perpetrators contained in judgments with really excruciating detail, so that they become not just legal findings, but information that's available in bite size for the public to send out in WhatsApp messages, for teachers' lessons plans. You know, I have these conversations, especially with Serge Bramats, who prosecuted both in the ICTY and the ICTR, and we talk about how much truth there is in all these judicial decisions and how difficult it is to transfer that truth to other audiences because it's designed in legal language and designed for academics, and we must do this. We must get it out of that space that it is in and put it out there in ways that people can understand. So this information in archives is pointless if successive generations do not master the facts and push back against revisionism. Deniers hope to erase the crimes committed in the Holocaust and genocide. The existence of powerful evidential records of systematic targeting of a people, roundups, killings, all exist, and we must make it accessible. I remember, for example, watching with my brothers years ago through the village mobile cinema, which used to come every month, made available in my country of origin in villages without electricity. I remember watching a film called Escape from Sobibor, and up to today, that film greatly shapes the opinions on the Holocaust that I make in the office that I sit. So I would also want to produce, for instance, for my nieces ask me, but Auntie, what do you do? And I keep thinking, I should produce children's storybooks on the Nuremberg trials, on the ICTY, on the ICTR, with the judges and the prosecutors, you know, as heroes, and through them tell the stories of the evidence that proves what happens during the Holocaust and the genocide. I want a comic book to give out to as many people, as many children as possible worldwide, depicting, for example, Raphael Lemkin, who lost 49 members of his family, including his parents, targeted for their identity as Jews, and who devoted his entire life to give that crime that took them a name, genocide, as a universal superhero. Not only did Raphael Lemkin give this crime a name, but on December 9th, 1948, The UN approved the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, and because of him, we now have an agreed-on definition of genocide. So 9th December is the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and of the prevention of this crime. Each year, my office takes the lead in organizing events to commemorate and honor the victims of the Holocaust and genocide. We host the Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly. We welcome all of you to join us, and we also welcome ideas on how we can do this bigger and better. We need partnerships to advocate more for universal ratification of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. We need to support national efforts to incorporate obligations under these conventions for those who've already ratified in the national legal systems. We need to help build national mechanisms to monitor prevention and accountability for genocide. We need to provide capacity building on the prevention of genocide to national and regional actors. We need to move atrocity prevention frameworks from concepts to reality with the knowledge that we live in this political climate that's marked by the international community's inability to prevent divisions and therefore expected atrocities. So we are living within a reality of increased privatization of security at the community level, and yet diplomatic efforts continue to be aimed at trust building at top political levels. We must build diplomatic capacity at the local level too. We must support and provide visibility to intercommunal trust building. And I can tell you this without any fear of contradiction, that hate can be transformed. In my past work as a mediator of armed conflict, I have worked in many contexts with people who are previously warlords, who committed the most atrocious crimes, who then turned into peace builders. So hate can be transformed. I was taught by John Paul Lederach, who you may know is one of our most prominent scholars in the peace-building field. He taught me to explore ideas through the one thing question. So yesterday, as I was sitting in the table over there, I asked of myself, what one thing of God's essence would our world miss if, say, the Eradicate Hate Global Summit did not happen? Because whatever that one thing is, it might just hold the idea of why we are all here. So I concluded that if the Eradicate Hate Global Summit did not happen, the world would miss what Laura said yesterday and the day before, quoting Margaret Mead. The world would miss a committed group of people who have made the decision to stand up against hate. So that's what we would be missing. This is extremely important that we are all here. We've committed to these 3 days because if those who do not fight hate, Holocaust and genocide denial do not exist, I can tell you, again, without any fear of contradiction, that the existing risk factors that my office draws up every day show that the world would be in the middle of another world war. So to you, the Pittsburgh community, what I may say to you is that you have thrown a stone into a pool of water. The ripples will spread far and wide as a testimony of how different individuals and groups of all faiths and backgrounds can assume a central role to combat hate and nurture peaceful coexistence among citizens and communities. I look forward and immediately imagine, a regional buildup of meetings across the world to the next global conference here in Pittsburgh. And to this, what I can say is that what I can offer you is the amazing convening power of my office. I also offer you my personal passion, my worldwide networks of people building peace every single day in villages without electricity. And I would say that the fragility of work on preventing another Holocaust, another genocide, means we require targeted, sustained actions, bridging generational divides, documenting, disseminating, creating our own narratives, and not just countering hate narratives. So in all the work I do every day to counter Holocaust and genocide denial, I have learned that the real question is not whether it happened, as we all know it did, but how many people do not know it happened and what kind of intergenerational work we need to put in place to make them know it happened and how it did. I thank you once more for your efforts and count on your active partnership as we strive to uphold the values that bind us together as a single human family. Thank you. Asanteni sana. Thank you.